I'm not speaking to the version of you that still believes time heals everything. Time doesn't heal. Time reveals. It reveals who was pretending. It reveals what was borrowed. It reveals which pieces of your identity belong to you and which were built from the opinions of people who never planned to stay. Most people spend their lives chasing healing because they believe the goal is to become the person they were before the pain. But what if that person was never strong enough to survive what was coming? What if life never intended to heal you, only to replace you? That is the question no one asks. Because if the answer is yes, then everything changes. Every betrayal, every abandonment, every sleepless night, every moment you questioned your worth. None of it happened to destroy you. It happened to erase the version of you that couldn't carry the weight of the future. Listen carefully. There comes a point where pain stops feeling like pain. Not because it disappears, because it becomes familiar. Like the sound of rain outside a window you've heard for so many years that silence feels stranger than the storm. That is the moment people misunderstand. They think you've become cold, detached, emotionless. They whisper things like, "You're not the same anymore." They're right. You're not. And you were never supposed to be. The version of you they miss was easier to manipulate, easier to guilt, easier to disappoint, easier to convince that sacrificing yourself was proof of love. That version had to disappear. Not because it was weak, because it was unfinished. Nobody warns you that growth feels like loss. Nobody tells you evolution sounds exactly like grief. You mourn people who are still alive. You mourn conversations that never happened. You mourn dreams you once protected with everything inside you. Then one morning, you wake up and something is gone. Not your sadness, not your memories. Your need. The desperate need to be understood. The exhausting need to explain yourself. The painful need to convince people your intentions were pure. It vanishes, quickly, without ceremony, without goodbye. And that is where freedom begins. People fear silence because silence removes distraction. When the noise disappears, you meet yourself. Not the version reflected through other people's approval, not the personality you developed to survive family expectations, not the character built for social acceptance. Your real self, the one buried beneath years of pretending. Meeting that person is terrifying because strangers are easier to understand than ourselves. You've spent years studying everyone else's behavior, learning their moods, predicting their reactions, avoiding conflict, managing expectations. But ask yourself something. How much time have you spent studying your own mind, your own patterns, your own hidden fears? Almost none. That's why loneliness feels unbearable to so many people. Not because they're alone, because they're trapped in a room with someone they've never taken the time to know themselves. The strongest people aren't fearless. They're familiar with disappointment, familiar with rejection, familiar with uncertainty. Nothing surprises them anymore because life already introduced them to every emotion they once believed would destroy them. Think about that. The thing you feared surviving, you survived. The betrayal you thought would end you, it didn't. The loneliness that kept you awake, you're still here. The humiliation, the failure, the abandonment, the silence after everyone left, you endured all of it. So why are you still afraid? Not because danger exists, because your memory hasn't caught up with your strength. You're still protecting yourself from battles you've already won. There's a strange moment during transformation, a moment almost nobody notices. You stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, what did this teach me about myself? That single question changes everything. Victims search for justice. Warriors search for understanding. Victims replay conversations. Warriors analyze patterns. Victims wait for apologies. Warriors become impossible to manipulate twice. The difference isn't intelligence, it's direction. One looks backward, the other studies forward. The world celebrates confidence, but confidence is loud. Real power isn't. Real power walks into a room without needing anyone to notice, because it didn't come to be seen. It came to observe. People underestimate observers until it's too late. The loudest person usually reveals the most. The quietest person learns the most. Silence isn't empty. It's collecting data. Every pause tells a story. Every hesitation exposes insecurity. Every unnecessary explanation reveals fear. Every emotional reaction uncovers attachment. People are constantly telling you who they are, not through words, through patterns. But patterns only become visible when your own emotions stop interrupting your perception. That's why emotional discipline is more dangerous than intelligence. An intelligent person can still be manipulated. A disciplined mind rarely can. The greatest prison isn't built with walls, it's built with identity. I'm just an emotional person. I'm always unlucky. I always attract toxic people. I'm not good enough. Listen to those sentences carefully. Everyone begins with the same word. I. Every repetition becomes architecture. Eventually, you don't live inside reality. You live inside the story you've repeated often enough to believe. Most people that defend their limitations harder than they defend their dreams, because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Changing your life isn't difficult. Changing the identity that created your life, that's terrifying, because if your story dies, who are you? This is why transformation feels violent. It isn't the world resisting you. It's your old identity fighting for survival. Habits scream, memories negotiate. Comfort whispers. Fear invents logical reasons to remain exactly where you've always been. And most people listen, not because they're weak, because the unknown demands faith. The familiar only demands repetition. There is something nobody teaches. Your peace will offend people who benefited from your chaos. The moment you stop chasing, someone accuses you of giving up. The moment you stop arguing, someone says you've changed. The moment you stop reacting, someone tries harder to provoke you because your reactions were feeding something: control, expectation, predictability. When those disappear, people panic. Not everyone. Only those who needed access to your emotions. Watch carefully. The people who respected you will celebrate your boundaries. The people who controlled you will resent them. Same boundary, different reaction. That tells you everything. Healthy people don't fear limits. Manipulative people do, because boundaries expose intention, and intention hates exposure. There was a version of you that believed everyone deserved another chance, another explanation, another opportunity, another excuse, until life taught you something simple: but tours speak louder than promises. Always, someone's future behavior already exists inside their past behavior. If disrespect repeats, believe it. If dishonesty repeats, believe it. If inconsistency repeats, believe it. Hope is beautiful. Delusion is expensive. Now the difference. One day you'll notice something strange. The things that once broke your heart barely interrupt your afternoon, not because you've become numb, because you've become selective. Every emotion costs energy. You've stopped spending yours on people who never invested theirs. That's maturity, not becoming colder, becoming intentional. Your attention is your most valuable currency. Spend it carefully. The strongest revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's forgetting they were ever your destination. Most people stay emotionally connected to those who hurt them, not through love, through resentment. Hatred is still attachment. Anger is still investment. Obsession wears many disguises. Freedom begins when they stop occupying mental space they no longer deserve. That's when something extraordinary happens. Your energy returns, not from nowhere, from everywhere. You stopped wasting it. There is a version of you waiting on the other side of complete emotional responsibility, a version untouched by approval, untouched by rejection, untouched by applause, untouched by criticism. Not because those things disappear, because they no longer define direction. That person doesn't need motivation. Only purpose, doesn't seek validation. Only alignment, doesn't chase belonging. Only truth, and once you meet that version, the world becomes strangely quiet. Not because life became easier, because your mind finally stopped fighting itself. There is a sentence people repeat without ever questioning it. Never let the world change who you are. It sounds noble, it sounds wise, but it is incomplete because the world will change you. It changes everyone. The real question is not whether you'll change. The real question is, who gets to shape the person you become? Your pain or your awareness? There is a difference. A wounded person reacts. An awakened person chooses. From the outside, they can look identical. Both become quieter. Both become distant. Both stop explaining themselves. But internally, they are worlds apart. One has surrendered to bitterness. The other has surrendered to clarity. Most people never notice the difference, because silence always looks the same until you listen closely. There was a time when every opinion reached me, every criticism, every rejection, every careless word spoken by someone who had never carried my burdens. I collected them, stored them, analyzed them, wondered what I should change, what I should hide. What version of myself would finally become acceptable? Do you know what I discovered? Acceptance is a moving target. The moment you become enough for one person, you become too much for another. Too quiet, too ambitious, too emotional, too detached, too kind, too difficult, too intense. Eventually, you realize something almost painful. People are rarely reacting to you. They're reacting to the version of themselves they see reflected in your existence. Your confidence reminds someone of their insecurity. Your discipline reminds someone of their excuses. Your peace reminds someone of their chaos. Your silence reminds someone of all the conversations they're trying to avoid with themselves. And suddenly, their opinion stops feeling personal. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable honesty makes people? Not brutal honesty, not cruel honesty, quit honesty. The kind that doesn't raise its voice, the kind that simply refuses to pretend. Because pretending is the currency of modern life. Pretend you're happy, pretend you're successful, pretend you're confident, pretend you're over it, pretend you're fine. Everyone is performing. Everyone is editing. Everyone is managing an image. And then someone walks into the room who has stopped performing, not because they're fearless, because they're exhausted. That person changes the atmosphere. Without saying a word, because authenticity is disruptive, it exposes every performance around it. The strange thing about becoming emotionally disciplined is that your victories become invisible. Nobody congratulates you for the argument you chose not to start, for the insult you decided not to answer, for the impulse you refused to obey, for the anger you transformed into understanding. The world celebrates visible achievements, money.tesi, recognition. But the greatest battles leave no audience, no applause, no trophies. Only silence, only growth, only a version of yourself that quietly became stronger while nobody was looking. Strength isn't what people think it is. Strength isn't never crying. Strength isn't pretending nothing hurts. Strength isn't becoming unreachable. Real strength is remaining conscious. When unconscious reactions would feel easier, anyone can lose control. It takes discipline to remain present while emotion demands surrender. That discipline is forged one decision at a time, not in extraordinary moments, in ordinary ones, when nobody is watching, when nobody would know if you compromised your values. When shortcuts whisper louder than integrity, character is built there, not on stages, not in victories, but in invisible decisions. one of the greatest lies ever taught, is that healing means returning to who you once were. No, healing is remembering who existed before survival taught you to abandon yourself. Think about that. Children don't ask permission to be themselves. They laugh without strategy. They dream without embarrassment. They speak without calculating every sentence. Then life happens. Judgment, comparison, failure, rejection slowly. Authenticity becomes negotiation, until one day, you can't remember where the mask ends, and your identity begins. That is the tragedy, not losing people, losing yourself. People often ask, what changed you? As though transformation happens in one dramatic event. It doesn't. Transformation is quiet. It happens every time disappointment teaches a lesson, every time trust breaks, every time loneliness forces self-conversation, every time reality refuses to match expectation. Tiny fractures, tiny adjustments, tiny awakenings, until eventually the person staring back from the mirror has different eyes, not because life hardened them, because life taught them where to look. The older I become, the less interested I am in being impressive. Impressive people collect attention. Grounded people collect peace. Attention is temporary. Peace compounds. One feeds the ego. The other feeds the soul. Choose carefully. The world rewards performance. Life rewards alignment. Those are not the same thing. Have you noticed? The loudest promises usually produce the weakest actions. People announce discipline. Successful people practice it. People announce loyalty. Loyal people demonstrate it. People announce love. Loving people embody it. Noise has become a substitute for substance because speaking feels productive even when nothing changes. The truly dangerous people rarely announce anything. They simply become, quietly, consistently, without permission, without witnesses, without applause. Silence has a strange effect. It forces people to reveal themselves. Stop texting first. Watch stop chasing. Watch stop explaining. Watch the truth arrives quickly when your effort leaves the equation. Many relationships survive only because one person refuses to stop carrying them. The moment they put the weight down, everything collapses. Not because they destroyed it, because they were the only foundation. That realization hurts at first, then it liberates you, because responsibility and guilt are different things. You are responsible for your effort, not for someone else's character, responsible for your honesty, not for someone else's interpretation, responsible for your actions, not for someone else's projections. Learn the difference, or you'll spend your entire life apologizing for burdens that were never yours. One day, you'll stop asking why certain people misunderstood you. You'll realize they couldn't understand what they were never willing to become. Depth cannot be explained to someone committed to the surface. Discipline cannot be explained to someone addicted to comfort. Integrity cannot be explained to someone negotiating every value. Some lessons require experience, not explanation. There is incredible freedom in allowing people to underestimate you. Most egos rush to prove themselves. Wisdom waits. Why interrupt someone's illusion when reality will eventually introduce itself? You don't need everyone to know your strength. You only need your strength to exist. Quiet confidence doesn't advertise. It doesn't compete. It doesn't compare. Mountains don't announce their height. They simply stand. There was a version of me that needed closure, needed explanations, needed final conversations. Now I understand something different. Closure is rarely given. It's chosen. Sometimes people disappear without apology. Sometimes questions remain unanswered. Sometimes the ending never feels complete. Waiting for someone else to complete your story is handing them authorship over your life. Take the pen back. Write the next chapter anyway. Day. Do you know why so many people remain stuck? because familiarity disguises itself as identity. I've always been this way. No. You've always practiced that way. Habits, repeated long enough, feel permanent. They aren't. The mind is more flexible than the stories it tells itself. Every pattern was learned, which means every pattern can be unlearned, slowly, pestilently, consistently. There is enormous power. In becoming difficult to provoke, imagine someone trying to control your emotions and finding nothing to hold. No predictable anger, no automatic defensiveness, no desperate need to be understood. Just awareness, just choice. That kind of stability cannot be manipulated easily, because manipulation depends on unconscious reactions. Remove the reaction, you remove the leverage. Eventually, life teaches a lesson that changes everything. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Kindness doesn't require unlimited availability. Compassion doesn't require self-abandonment. Love doesn't require the destruction of your boundaries. The strongest hearts know when to open and when to close the gate, not from fear, from wisdom, because protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's responsibility, especially when you've spent years rebuilding it from pieces no one else even noticed were broken. One day, someone will tell you that you've changed. Smile. They are right. You changed because you finally stopped asking the world for permission to become who you were always capable of being. And sometimes, the quietest transformation creates the loudest impact, because nothing confuses people more than someone who no longer needs their approval. There is a version of you the world has never met, not because you hide it, because life demanded that you become someone else long before you ever discovered who you truly were. You learned to smile before you learned to speak honestly. You learned to apologize before you learned to defend yourself. You learned to earn love before you learned you were worthy of it. That is how conditioning begins. Quietly, nobody announces it. Nobody tells you they're replacing your instincts with expectations. It just happens one compromise at a time, one disappointment at a time, one betrayal at a time, until one day you wake up wearing a personality that kept you alive, but never allowed you to live. The frightening part is, most people never notice. They spend decades protecting a version of themselves they never consciously chose. They defend habits they inherited, opinions they borrowed, fears they absorbed, dreams they accepted because someone else told them those dreams were practical. Imagine carrying a map only to discover it belongs to someone else's destination. How far would you walk before realizing you've been traveling in the wrong direction? Some people never realize, not because they're incapable, because certainty feels safer than truth. Truth asks you to rebuild. Certainty only asks you to repeat. People often believe becoming stronger means adding something. More confidence, more discipline, more knowledge, more resilience. Sometimes strength isn't about addition, it's subtraction, moving the fear that never belonged to you, moving the guilt someone placed on your shoulders, moving the need to be liked. Removing the belief that your worth depends on your usefulness. Every layer you remove brings you closer to the person you were before the world started negotiating your identity. Perhaps you were never incomplete, perhaps you were simply buried. There is a dangerous illusion that everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. No access must be earned, not through words, through consistency. Anyone can speak beautifully. Anyone can promise forever. Anyone can perform loyalty while life is comfortable. Pressure reveals truth. Watch people when circumstances become inconvenient. Watch who stays. Watch who disappears. Watch who only remembers your existence when they need something. Portals never lie. Emotion sometimes does. That's why wisdom watches behavior, not declarations. Silence has become my favorite teacher, Not because silence contains all the answers, because silence exposes all the questions. Sit alone long enough, and every distraction begins to fade. No notifications, no conversations, no applause, no criticism. Just you, at first. It feels uncomfortable, then it feels peaceful. Eventually, it feels necessary because in silence, you stop hearing the world and finally begin hearing yourself. That voice inside you has been trying to speak for years. It was simply drowned out by everyone else's expectations. There is something almost tragic about how quickly people abandon themselves for acceptance. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny, agree with opinions they don't believe, stay in relationships that quietly erase them, shrink their ambitions, lower their standards, silence their intuition, all for belonging. But belonging purchased through self-betrayal is only another form of loneliness, because even if everyone accepts you, they're accepting a version that isn't real. And somewhere deep inside, you know it. That knowledge becomes exhaustion, not physical exhaustions, spiritual exhaustion, the kind sleep cannot fix, the kind success cannot distract, the kind only truth can heal. The strongest people I have ever known share one uncommon habit. They stop negotiating with reality. They don't waste years wishing the past had been different. They don't bargain with things they cannot control. They don't confuse acceptance with surrender. Acceptance isn't saying, I like what happened. Acceptance is saying, it happened. Nothing more, nothing less. Reality doesn't need your approval. It only asks for your attention. The sooner you stop arguing with facts, the sooner your energy becomes available for change. There is immense freedom in admitting that not everyone will understand your path. They weren't given your lessons. They didn't survive your storms. They didn't carry your responsibilities. So why should they automatically understand your decisions? Stop asking strangers to validate experiences they never lived. Some chapters of your life will always remain invisible to people who only saw the cover, and that's okay. Not every truth needs witnesses. Do you know what fear truly hates? Movement. Fear survives through hesitation, through overthinking, through waiting for certainty, but certainty rarely arrives before action. Confidence isn't born first. Action is. Every courageous person you've ever admired once stood exactly where you are, unsure, unprepared, questioning themselves. The difference? They moved anyway, not because fear disappeared, because purpose became louder. There comes a moment when you stop trying to convince people of your intentions. If someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no explanation will satisfy them. If someone truly wants clarity, very few words are necessary. That realization changes the way you communicate. You become quieter, more precise, less defensive. You stop arguing with assumptions. You stop chasing distorted narratives. Because truth doesn't become stronger by shouting, it remains true, even when nobody believes it. One lesson took me years to understand. Being needed is not the same as being valued. People can need your money without respecting you, need your kindness. Without appreciating you, need your loyalty. Without returning it, need your presence. Without protecting it. Need creates dependency. Value creates respect. Never confuse the two. One disappears the moment your usefulness ends. The other remains even when you have nothing left to offer except your existence. Most people spend their lives escaping discomfort, but discomfort is honest. Comfort often lies. Comfort tells you to stay where it's familiar. Discomfort invites growth. Comfort promises safety. Discomfort promises possibility. Comfort whispers, remain who you've always been. Discomfort asks, what if you're capable of becoming someone you've never imagined? Growth has never spoken softly. It has always arrived disguised as inconvenience. People ask me, why are you so calm now? They assume peace arrived because life became easier. They couldn't be more wrong. Because I stopped expecting life to be fair. Fairness is not a guarantee. Meaning is every experience contains something. A lesson, a warning, a redirection, a mirror. Time to find the meaning. And suffering loses its authority over you. One day, someone will try to provoke the version of you that no longer exists. They'll press old buttons, expect old reactions, wait for familiar anger. But the person they once controlled will be gone, not hiding gone, replaced by someone who understands that emotional reactions are expensive. And not everyone deserves that investment. That moment will confuse them because they prepared for the old you. They never imagined meeting the new one. There is an extraordinary kind of power in becoming emotionally independent, not isolated. Independent, you enjoy love, but don't depend on it for identity. You appreciate praise, but don't require it to feel worthy. You welcome companionship, but aren't destroyed by solitude. Freedom begins the moment your emotional foundation moves inside yourself. Instead of resting in the hands of other people, that's the day life changes, not externally, internally. And internal revolutions always outlast external victories. Look carefully at the strongest tree in the forest. Its strength didn't come from avoiding storms. Its strength came from surviving them. Every violent wind forced its roots deeper. Every season taught adaptation. Every scar became structure. You are no different. The storms weren't proof that life was against you. They were proof that your roots were being tested for a future your younger self could never have supported. The world is obsessed with becoming more successful, more admired, more visible, more powerful. But very few people ask a different question. What should I become less of? Less reactive, less fearful, less dependent on approval, less distracted, less controlled by emotion. Sometimes less creates more. Silence creates clarity. Stillness creates awareness. Discipline creates freedom. Absence creates value. Nature has always understood this. Only humans struggle to believe it. There will come a morning when you no longer recognize the person who once begged to be understood, not because you've become cold, because you've become complete. You finally understand that not everyone was meant to understand you. Some people entered your life to teach, some to challenge, some to leave, and a rare few to remind you of who you were becoming all along. When that morning arrives, don't look back with regret, look back with gratitude, because every version of yourself, even the broken one, carried you to this moment, and without realizing it, the monster the world believes it created has become something far more dangerous. A person who can no longer be controlled by fear.